On April 4th, 1999, I arrived home from school. I had just graduated. It took a few semesters longer than I originally planned, but I was proud to be done. I had no idea what adult life held for me, but I was optimistic.
That phone call was surely one of the strangest I've ever received. And no, I couldn't hear the music. A few hundred yards outside of town, I came to a junction. Mulling over the strangeness of being back home, I stopped to notice a forest I'd never explored. It was dark, but somehow attractive. I made a mental note to explore it later, and took a step towards town when I heard a meow near my feet. I pictured what it would be like to be the owner, and I imagined describing him to a friend. Lonely? Nah, I don't get too lonely. Besides my mom, who's only a cat, an old cat, but a good friend to talk to. My fictional friend would reply, "You talk things over, do you?" I'd nod. Uh-huh. Been together a long time, so we can read each other's moods. I understand what makes the cat tick. The cat knows what makes me tick. Of course, I didn't know this cat at all. We'd never met. He was a funny-looking cat, with a funny resting face and a Salvador Dali mustache. I couldn't imagine picking out this cat to bring home from a store. I leaned down to pet him, without entirely knowing if cats like to be pet at all. His coarse hair ran through my fingers as he purred. Clearly he liked me. That was a good sign. Alex Eagleston, college graduate, friend of small animals. I stepped into the elevator, expecting to find the cat. I scanned the dark floor and found nothing. I sighed as the elevator began to shake, vibrating with motion. The elevator came to a smooth but unexpected stop. I cringed with anxiety as the lights flickered. Please don't die, please don't die. I pleaded with the mechanical gods to keep the power on. My prayers weren't answered. I don't know what made me do it, but I poked the giant eye. The pyramid's tears seemed to power the room. What the hell is going on here? I asked, thinking it sounded nicer than, who the hell doesn't know what an elevator is? So the stupid thing was a girl? I just assumed it was a boy cat, seeing as how it had a spindly mustache. Although, now that I reflected on it, facial hair was not exclusive to male animals or male humans for that matter. She didn't know elevators. I doubted she'd know her 20th century Spanish Catalan surrealist painters all that well either. I said, "Right, I saw a cat earlier. He had a funny mustache and crazy eyes." Naturally, my description of her beloved feline was offensive to her. Clearly, this was a woman projecting a rather strong personality onto this cat. She took a deep breath and said quickly, I told her I wouldn't mind helping her find her cat. I told her we should move quickly and get out of this dank basement. I waited for a moment as she processed what I said. She was a very difficult girl to read, especially without being able to see her face. I could tell something was wrong. She really projected her opinions and feelings into the room, even without saying them. I reflected on her words. A mysterious girl who lived with her cat in an old steel mill. It was obvious to me that her words didn't contain the entire truth. Something about her compelled me. Pieces of her story started to fit together in my mind. Well, at least that's what I thought at the time. I can admit now that some pieces were pure fabrication on my part. In my head, her story went something like this. Sammy was homeless. A runaway woman who was trying to escape hard times. Someone who had found refuge in her cat. Maybe the only thing left from her previous life. Somehow this felt right inside my head. And still, I could tell I was missing something. Her clothes were clean, her breath was fresh. She was much more energetic than any homeless girl I'd ever known. Not that I'd known many. The secret to what I was missing lay in her temperament. I had known her for less than 2 hours when she vanished from my sight. Sammy was gone for good, swept away as if she'd never been there at all. A door into nothing, into a different reality, opened up and swallowed Sammy whole. At that moment, I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was replay the scene of her being pulled into obscurity by nothing. There 1 second and gone the next. The calm night wind of springtime seemed to contrast the inner workings of my brain. I was moving on autopilot back towards my home. I felt as if I'd seen something that wasn't meant to be seen. As if the curtain had lifted on reality and exposed the man upstairs. Like I just found out Santa wasn't real. I couldn't yet put into words what I now understood. Something had changed inside of me. Pulsating through my veins was the energetic charge of irrevocable loss, all for a woman I didn't know. This feeling wasn't pure. It was cut with something I couldn't put my finger on at the time. I believe now that it was a profound sense that I had discovered something. Only problem was this something wasn't meant to be seen. In that moment, I was a child finding a magazine meant only for an adult's eyes. I was both intrigued and repulsed, confused by the images spinning inside my head. When I arrived home, tired, confused, and out of breath, I tossed my things on the floor and made my way to the couch. My mother still wasn't home yet. I wasn't surprised. She often worked late right before her company released a new product. My mother, a 49-year-old, short, red-headed woman, was an information systems programmer analyst for Pacific Chime, the West Coast's leading telecommunications provider. Her job, ironically located on the East Coast, worked her harder in 1 year than most jobs work people in a decade. This job paid well. Without it, my sister and I would have never gotten through college. I left school debt-free thanks to the back-breaking mental labor of my mother. There was a moment of apathy where I almost didn't click the link. The last thing he sent me that was allegedly scary turned out to be a picture of 2 elephants locked in the throes of passion. I sighed and clicked the link. The file was 2.9 megabytes. In the dark room, the monitor was hurting my eyes. I rubbed them and waited for the file to load. I thought of all the things it could be. More animal porn, human porn, cartoon porn. You could never really guess with this guy. But it was most certainly going to be pornographic. Maybe a girl from my high school was now into adult videos and was doing some particularly unladylike things. While the video loaded, I thought of all the girls I had gone to school with who might be involved in such activities. All the girls that came to mind neither had the looks nor the motivation to seek out an adult filmmaker. I gave up. I'd just have to wait for it to finish downloading. When the file had finished downloading, I waited with fading patience for my computer to open it in QuickTime. Finally, it was loaded. I knew he was right. I couldn't let myself live with the guilt of not going back to look for her. Why did I run away? Why did I just stand there and let her get pulled into what? What exactly had she been pulled into? Just the thought of going back to the factory made my stomach tighten. But if I didn't go back, I knew I'd never be able to live with myself. I think there was a part of me that didn't believe what my eyes had seen. That I was missing something. Some vital piece of information that slipped my mind. The whole thing could be explained logically. As the young man got closer, my bewilderment grew. His name was Michael. He was a good kid. A bit younger than me, and usually worth a laugh or two. My hand covered my eyes to block the sunlight to see him better. I thought back to the last time I had seen him. For some reason, I couldn't place any memories of him since before high school. But I knew I must have seen him since then. There was part of me that wanted to tell Michael everything, to get it all out in the open. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. There was something that felt personal, almost intimate about my meeting with Sammy. Like in that moment of her disappearance, we were linked. But it was from my eyes only. Her memory was from my thoughts only. But I needed to talk to someone about the situation. So I proceeded with caution. We saw something we never could have imagined. A being made of stars. The entire galaxy, no, the universe maybe, compressed into the silhouette of one entity. It hadn't noticed us at first. We were as insignificant to him as the trillions of stars at its core. But when provoked, it came after us, like we were the most sought-after thing in the universe. I'd been scared before. Everyone has, but those past memories of fright were nothing compared to what we had just experienced. As if a black hole incarnate had come to exist and it wanted us gone. As if consuming us was its only purpose. I couldn't say why I felt that way at the time, but I'd known it was true. And with all this in mind, Sammy's vanishing was starting to feel like the least supernatural thing I would experience. Once again, I had left the old factory, frightened and confused. And once again, I didn't have Sammy with me. While we waited for Michael's camera to transfer the photos, we began to talk. It was as if someone had cracked an egg over my head, and what trickled out was hot dread, a feeling of pure anxiety. All of my fears were confirmed. What I was experiencing was real. There was no doubt about it. We uploaded the photos to Onism 1999 and waited for an explanation. We had our doubters, but more people wanted to believe than not. And with each reply, Sammy got pushed further away from the forefront of the discussion. I explained how the building was the same one from the Elevator Girl video, but everyone was more concerned by the creepy figures in the photo. Each time my little mailbox turned red, I slowly realized that everyone on this forum wanted the content to be true. They needed it to be. A few people tried to explain why the photos were distorted, but most people believed it to be ghosts, or the devil, or other stupid things like that. I considered myself something of a philosopher in college. I thought I had answers, but now that I've come face to face with the otherworldly, I know now that every person who tells you about spirituality, dead people and all that have no idea what they're talking about. Someone told a lie and it somehow stuck. I told the truth, and it just gets muddied up by that same ancient myth. With the exception of my post, most of the things on that forum seemed like lies. That was until about 2 weeks after my post, when a user posted something about a girl who could rip holes in time and space. I wouldn't have believed it myself, but he had photos, and we had seen the girl before. Michael and I spent the next hour or so recounting the events of me finding Sammy, and us running into the star creatures inside of the old factory. As we told the story, Bella just looked into my eyes and never reacted. I first began with trepidation. As I went on, I could tell she was doing her best to understand my story. Something felt familiar about her, but not in the I've met her sort of way. Something deeper. I dated a girl in college who was a women and gender studies major. She told me that she believed men and women were all the same at our core, that we were all made of the same elements, not just on a physical level, but in a metaphysical level. She was a strong believer in spirituality, although she'd be the first to tell you she was religious. She told me she believed everyone had soulmates, plural, the series of people we were compatible with. In her theory, this applied to friendship as well as romantic relationships. She said that when the universe was created, all matter was one object, and that since we're all matter, we are all the same. She said that she believes our soulmates were cut from the same section of that initial piece of matter. That unexpected feeling of familiarity you feel when you meet someone for the first time means you were meant to meet. I personally didn't believe it. I still don't think she has all her facts straight. But every time I feel what I felt when Vela looked in my eyes, I thought of this explanation. Vela told us things. Confusing things. Things that, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have believed. The way she spoke seemed two-sided. As if for a few moments, a side of her that she was trying to keep hidden was visible. And as soon as we noticed, she made to cover herself up. She made jokes more often than she was serious. But when the serious aspect of her personality appeared, I was convinced that's who she really was. This was almost more fascinating than the information she was giving us. That's the thing with people, isn't it? You could show them all the mysteries of the universe, but if they're distracted by the human element of the tale, they'll shift all of their attention there. Self-consumed with humanity. Self-consumed with other people. You know? That's just how people are. I reflected on her story. I wanted to reply, but something inside me told me to let the words hang in the air. It was as if the longer the pause between her words and mine, the more truth they carried. Finally, I spoke. The story was so specific. It sounded so familiar, and yet I couldn't place it. It was like I had read it in a book somewhere or watched it on a TV show. But still, no particular name or day came to mind. When we sat on the bus with Bella and began to talk, it felt as if she was a different person. The edge to her personality had dulled a little bit, and she seemed almost happy to see us. We were just leaving Frankton when she told us what she'd learned about Sammy. Sammy Park was a 23-year-old Korean American who had moved to Frankton from the city. She was an only child and lived with her mother until she moved to Frankton on March 2nd for her job. She was some sort of legal cleric and hadn't even begun working yet when she vanished. Apparently, the organization she was going to work for does a public TV Korean news show. The friend who got her the job did the reporting. The police have no leads. It is currently being treated as a missing persons case. I didn't say it at the time, but something felt off. The Sammy I met was strange. She didn't seem like the kind of girl who could have grown up in a city and moved to a small town and worked for a television station. People who don't know what elevators are usually aren't capable of such tasks. My Sammy, and Sammy in the newspaper, may have looked the same. There was a difference there. I could feel it. Vella didn't shoot him down. She didn't mock him. In my head, the rational part of my brain was already thinking of a variety of corrections to his ideas. But after this week, I knew pretty much anything was possible. The following week or so, my mood was strangely languid and serene. Vella's words buzzed in my ears, like a bee hovering around my head. It was waiting to sting, waiting to have its full impact. From my bedroom window, you could see blooming green leaves of summer popping up here and there on the rolling suburban hills, their branches reaching up to the sky like magic ropes. I hadn't spoken with Michael, Vella, or Rory in almost 8 days. Michael was stuck in his house, pretending to study for finals. And taking her cue from the other women in my life, Vella vanished. I had gone to the Frankton arcade hoping to see her each day, but she wasn't around. I spoke with her manager, a Korean man, about Vella and Sammy, but he offered very little information. She said she needed to take some time off, so I gave it to her. Lots of help, thank you. See you later, jackass. I hadn't spoken with Rory since that night either. As soon as we got out, Vella went into depth on her soul survivors and metaphysics. Then he ran off saying he needed to clear his head. And just like that, all alone again. I listened to cassette tapes of old music. Callum Bowen, Nikos Sakalakos, Andrew Allinson. As I listened to the soaring strings and strangely syncopated bass line of Symphony 7 in E-flat by Andrew Allinson, I replayed that night in my head. I believed Vella. I shouldn't have. It sounded like pseudo-religious bullshit. But I had seen the soul survivor with my own eyes, and I had seen Sammy vanish into the abyss of what looked like our universe. Where had she gone? Sammy. I missed her. I didn't know her really, but I felt like I did. In the unreal twilight hours, in between sleep and waking, she slipped into my dreams. Got tangled in my thoughts, like the blankets tangled between my legs, her brain melting with mine. In the dreams, we didn't speak. In the dreams, we didn't do much of anything. I could just feel that she was there and that she understood. She had to still be out there. Out there in the soul space, maybe. Okay. Maybe I blew up at Rory. Maybe he didn't deserve that abuse. I'll admit that much. I was scared. So many odd things were happening around me, and I didn't handle it very well. First I met Sammy, then I lost Sammy. Then I met Rory, who had lost Carrie. For a moment, I considered saying that we were alike, but I often have to remind myself that I didn't really know Sammy. We met only once, but still, I can't get her off my mind. I couldn't deal with this. I was going to unplug this phone. I winced every time this stupid thing rang. I was having this recurring dream. It was a weird dream. The sort of dream that shouldn't be scary because the imagery is actually pretty tame. But still, no matter what I did, I just couldn't shake the feeling the dream gave me the next morning. There's this woman. She's a woman made of plastic and we're watching her. Yes, we are, you and I. We observe her motionless form and discuss the state of her condition. We're not doctors in the dream. We have no intention of helping her. But at the same time, I don't think we want to hurt her. There's a third person there. But she doesn't speak. In fact, we never see her face. I think she's judging us. In a way, you and I are trying to impress her. You speak more than I do, and for some reason you're a woman. But I guess that isn't so strange now, is it? Okay. I'm going to say it. I don't know if you've noticed. I certainly did. In fact, I'd been trying to ignore it all along. You see, there was a figure in my house. It followed me around. It was lurking in the corner of my eyes at all times. Was this why my mood had been so strange? Why I felt so weird since I last saw everyone? No, I don't think that was it. Something told me the figure wasn't bad. It had been here a while. Haven't you noticed it? It had been here since I returned home from college. Maybe even before. I think I needed to speak with it. It was materialized. It was no longer transparent. Was it an entity? Why the hell was it living in my house? This was the turning point for my journey, I think. Everything came down to this night in the end. What I would do next, you know? I didn't have to follow the entity here, but I'm glad I did. I couldn't imagine life if I hadn't. But maybe there wouldn't be life if I hadn't. I knew what the entity wanted. It wanted me to play the record, to drop the needle, to broadcast the lush and soaring tunes of this masterful LP for the world to hear. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I didn't know that exactly, but I had my suspicions. That was weird. I've known Michael forever, and I swear to God, he always lived in that house. I needed to relax. I was letting all the paranormal get to me. Nothing to worry about, see? Stupid panda. He's just sick. Probably. Crap. I was gonna have to go all the way to Windtown to find this thing. I don't want to go alone. I wondered if Vela was at the arcade. I told Michael what had happened, and thankfully he seemed to believe me. I almost got defensive. I almost pointed out how Rory endangered our lives with his stupid attention-seeking lie. But I let it go, at least externally. When I moved from Frankton to Jet Set City to start college, I spent the whole bus ride mentally reviewing my 19 years and realizing that almost everything that had happened to me was pretty embarrassing. I'm not exaggerating. I didn't want to remember any of it. It was so pathetic. The more I thought about my life up to then, the more I hated myself. It wasn't that I hadn't been happy or hadn't enjoyed my high school experience. I could recall a handful of really great times. But if you added them up, the shameful, painful memories far outnumbered the others. When I thought of how I'd been living, how I'd been approaching life, it was all so trite, so miserably pointless. When I made it to college, I knew this was a time for reinvention. All I needed to do was imagine the Alex I wanted to be and work towards it. Forget the old Alex and be someone worth being. Now that I'm here, floating with you, I don't know if I was approaching life right. Did any of it really matter? So anyway, I got to college. Made friends with people I never thought I'd hang out with. Got interested in poetry. Started listening to Dylan. I bought a guitar, never really learned. I got interested in novels and music. I was in with the hip crowd. But being hip doesn't mean you have direction. That isn't to say some of the kids I met weren't going places, and I hear many of them did. Just not me. I was too selfish, too unoriginal, too much of a parasite feeding off everyone's cool. I remember sitting at the burger joint wondering why I wasn't more like Michael or Rory. Michael, concerned about the future. Rory, someone who had something to aspire to. At the time, I told myself I had a purpose. I was looking for Semi Park. I was going to find her, save her, I don't know. Something was going to happen. Somehow there would be meaning in all this craziness. I could, but I didn't like it. As we rode along the highway, I felt a sudden fondness for Rory and Michael. There was something fun about our little quest for this record. Far from my mind were the things that brought me here. Sammy's disappearance, the entities, Bella, she was probably still mad at me, fuming away at her arcade, taking out her anger at me on unsuspecting tweens. I wondered why she didn't want us to find the record. I wondered if she had some bad memories associated with it, or if there was something about entities that I didn't know yet. My mind turned to Y2K. Could the world really end this year? You asked me 6 months ago. I'd have laughed at you. But now that I've seen so much strangeness, could honestly say that stranger things have happened. Suddenly, everything made sense. Well, at least a little bit of sense. Bella, the guitar, her ability to fight with sound. Clearly, she was the musician, the creator of this record. How stupid I had been. I told her about the record, and she must have assumed I read the title closely. Bella Wild. Probably a stage name. I asked the others to stay back when I spoke with Bella myself. I knew I needed to apologize alone. As I walked across the chewing gum and popcorn-covered floor, I imagined what the title of my quest would be if my life was a video game. Quickly, it was becoming Apology Quest, or Legend of Please Forgive Me. I wondered how many other people I'd have to say I'm sorry to before I found Sammy. If that's even where life was taking me. Lately, Sammy wasn't at the forefront of my thoughts. I wanted to find her, and I really wanted her to be safe. But the more time that passed between meeting her and thinking about her, she became less real. More of a concept, more of a mythical being that only existed in my mind and the mind of the internet. It was easier than I expected. Now, to convince her about getting the record, I introduced her to Claudio and Chandra. We went to the burger joint and talked about everything that had happened up to this point. I told her about their brother. Rory talked about his sister. Michael talked about his college fears. And I just listened. I never expected to find such an amazing group of friends so close to home. It was a great feeling. And now came the tricky part. To ask her to go inside of the mind dungeon with me and look for the record. Vela asked us to listen to the record before we broadcasted. There was a certain aura of unease surrounding her. She pretended it had to do with not knowing what would happen after we broadcast the record. But I knew something else was wrong. I could tell that she wasn't happy with our replies. But none of us knew what to say. The music had shown us a side of Vela that we had never expected to see. A sort of vulnerable side. I felt compelled to chase after her, to tell her the music was beautiful and that she was incredible. But my feet didn't move. I remained as still and as silent as everyone else. My body motionless. I surveyed everyone's eyes, willing my brain to bind with theirs and get what they had been thinking. Had they all hated it? What had triggered such a lack of enthusiasm? For everyone, time is measured differently. For myself, it was in days since Sammy had been missing. For Michael, it was days until school began and he lost his freedom. For Vela, time was measured in music. A careless and overwhelming existence where the oral world carried more weight than the physical world. For Claudio and Rory, it was days since their siblings vanished from their lives. For Chandra, I think it was days until she could escape counting days since her little brother's disappearance. But for all of us, time moved at the same rate, calculating days until we found a way to feel important. I don't think I've ever loved a woman before. Not romantically, at least. I love my mother, and I love my sister, my cousins, my female friends. I love them, but not in the way that's filled with a romantic sense of love. I've had 7 girlfriends throughout college and high school. None of them lasted long, and I never minded when things were over. Something funny happened that night when I went to bed. I had a dream again. Yes, it was about the android, but she wasn't trapped inside a moving van. She was free and human. In my dream, I knew her very well. We'd been together for a long time. We weren't old. We didn't get old. I knew inside my heart how well she treated me. I knew, for the first time, she was the only woman I'd ever treated well. Inside my dream world, she entered my dreams. She entered my thoughts. She filled up every part of my mind, even the parts I wanted to hide away. She was like the old Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water." She was my water, rushing into all the cracks. Nothing could be hidden from her, but I didn't mind. She didn't judge. She didn't have a place to judge. She, unlike all other humans, was aware of human flaws. She didn't pretend we didn't think about hatred, violence, jealousy, sex. I was a person. She got that. Oh, if only she was too. She is, and always will be, a woman made of plastic. I know how funny this sounds, and trust me, I do. How can a woman made of plastic be loved so much by a real flesh and blood human? I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. What was I feeling? It was like a warm light surrounded me. Someone had flipped a switch in my brain, and I now understood something I wasn't capable of understanding before. I felt a weird joy inside me. Like I had a secret no one else was allowed to know. A secret that was meant only for my ears. And it was the android who told me. But I couldn't. I tried to recall the dream, but it was already slipping away to the periphery of my mind. I couldn't remember specific scenes, but I could remember the feeling the dream had given me, and I knew they wouldn't be leaving me. I thought about Michael, then Rory, then Claudio, then Chandra. I had no desire to see any of them. I thought about Vela, then Sammy, and I felt weird. Like I had done something wrong. As if I had wronged them somehow in the dream. And just like that, suddenly I needed to see Vela. But why? Why did I suddenly have the urge to apologize? No, that wasn't it. Thank her? No, I don't know why. But I needed to find her and do it alone. Walking back to the van, I started to question my actions. Why was I so convinced finding this android was such a good thing? Why was I putting myself in danger like this? A lot of times I felt like I was an airplane circling the landing strip waiting for clearance, waiting for a purpose. Maybe I was Alex, android hunter. No, that didn't make sense. Alex, soul survivor hunter? Still not right. She was beautiful. Masterful creation. Smooth plastic skin, slick curves, and a perfectly sculpted face that reminded me of one of the anime girls on Claudio's shirt. Did I really do that? Did I always deny I harmed someone? Do I always feel the need to justify my actions? Maybe. Yes. I totally did. The Essentia 2000 went on staring at me with that expressionless face of hers. A face of plastic. Looking at her, I thought of a satellite floating in space. A drifting piece of man-made material, traveling through a place man can barely go. What I had said was out of pure curiosity. I had no way of knowing with any certainty that I had harmed any of these women. My words, though, seemed to have jammed at something in there. I could read the effect on her face. Eventually, without a word, the Essentia 2000 turned away and proceeded from the room. I longed to wash away the bitter taste in my mouth, but even sipping from a water bottle wouldn't cleanse me of it. The whole situation felt like a dream, as if I was wading through pools of jello. Even then, I kept telling myself that the things around me weren't that weird, that seeing Sammy vanish, meeting entities, and entering inside a dungeon in my mind should have prepared me for this. But you know, I don't think it did. I wanted to ask the Essentia 2000 if I could feel the feelings of my parallel lives. I realized now I was just seeking an explanation for the various feelings that were surging through my heart. I felt closer to Vela, closer to, well, every single parallel life of the Essentia 2000, and yet furthest from Sammy. Was Sammy really all that important to me? Or had I just been delaying joining the real world with all this adventure? Did I really ever want to find her now that I know what finding her actually meant? No, I did. I really did. And I don't regret what I learned. Or even what happened next, because if I had never learned what I was about to learn, I could have never met you. And without you, all hope is lost. I was somehow cold and hot at the same time. My heart had both accelerated and stopped. It was a mess of emotions. What the actual hell had I done? I was so stupid. He tried to reach out to me. He asked me for help, me. For some reason, he had picked me as his confidant, and I turned him away. Were my own personal whims so important that I couldn't see he was begging for help? A year ago, I would have thought, don't be so hard on yourself, or if someone wants to die, there isn't anything you can do to stop it. I would have convinced myself it was somehow not my fault. I wouldn't have allowed myself to feel guilty. Why was I so afraid of feeling guilty? Why did I continue to convince myself that nothing was ever my fault? Sometimes things are your fault.
And sometimes you're supposed to feel bad, supposed to feel low, supposed to feel like you let the world down. You! Or in this case, me! I wanted to tell Vella he reached out to me. I wanted to tell her I had been cruel. I had been so selfish. And then I was selfish again. I didn't tell Vella anything. I told her I was sorry. I cried with her. I did my best to not let her know I felt guilty. Why? Because I wanted her to like me. I needed everyone to like me. I needed to be a solid guy in everyone's book. No. I just needed to seem like a good person to myself. And I needed to change that. Self-love disguised with gifts and lies does not make a good person. Inward appearances? If I wanted to like myself, I needed to be someone worth liking. Grief. It can make you forget about all the things you thought were important. When was the last time I bought a new record? When was the last time I turned on a video game? Read a book? Debated with a friend about something I didn't really understand? Life is all about balance, and when something terrible happens, the scale tips towards the tragedy, and all things previously thought to be important fall out of view. But time goes on, and we were running out of time. I needed to get my shit together and focus. The Essentia 2000 worked hard to console me. She reminded me of a mothering Vella, a truly all-knowing being. Vella. I needed to call Vella. I need to bring myself back to a functioning level and actually do something. I saw in the dark, 2 floors below me, 2 women of the same soul spoke about the fate of the world. Do you know how weird it was thinking that? No, you really can't. Well, maybe now you can that you're in the same situation. One soul, but many people. In the darkness, thinking about the end of all reality. Knowing inside myself that all of this was true. These concepts, previously absurd, were now mysteriously vivid in every detail. To the point where I felt I could grasp them in my hands, I pictured myself alone in the universe. All things around me had been destroyed. Everyone was gone. And then she floated by. Sammy. But she wasn't Sammy. She was Vella. But also not Vella. She was the Essentia 2000, Oda, Yuzu, and Nyla. Somehow these people were linked by their soul. Whatever that meant. What did it mean to share a soul but be a different person? What did the Essentia 2000 called it? A parallel life? I thought of Buddhists and their concept of past lives. Before I was Alex, I was a pirate or a poor village girl living in Croatia. But in a parallel life, I was Alex, a pirate, and a little girl in Croatia. I lived all of my lives at once, in distant but similar realities. Similar was only an assumption. I realized now how little I knew about reality. I knew I needed to find my friends individually, and convince them that the end was coming. I spent the next half hour telling the tale of me, the Essentia 2000, and our journey deep into the dungeon of her mind, and into the dungeon of my mind. A feeling of hope grew as I realized everyone I asked to help me said yes. Did I really deserve everyone's help? Nope, not at all. Maybe this is why I was exceedingly grateful. I thought about Michael. He was the only one I hadn't seen since I returned from my trip into the Essentia 2000's mind. Where had he gone? Why hadn't anyone else seen him? As we walked back to my house, a strange feeling of nostalgia overwhelmed me. It was as if I hadn't seen Michael in a really long time. As if the Michael I'd spent the past year with had been broken, and now he was fixed. This was the Michael I remembered. In the cooling winter air, I had a series of memories return to me. All of them involved Michael, but none of them felt real. As if I'd experienced them in a far-off, distant life. The promise of a future is something I'd grown to take for granted. Now, with the threat of impending doom, I realized how silly it was to do so. And what else could be expected of me? I've lived the past 25 years knowing nothing but a series of tomorrows. In fact, I'll do that tomorrow had become my mantra over the past 2.5 decades. Tomorrow, there may be nothing. Today, may be the last day. This knowledge triggered something in me to fall away. It was as if the core of my personality dropped away and nothing came in to fill the hole. It was like being hungry all the time except food, mindless fun, and things that normally bring happiness had lost their appeal. The knowledge that this was all temporary had stripped me of the ability to experience basic human pleasures that I craved from a sense of normal, a desire to go back. No, that's not right. I didn't want to go back. If I went back, I'd be the same person I used to be. Selfish, unfocused, lazy. I had no purpose. I was a blank slate that was covered in war paint. I was going to defeat whatever was coming from my reality. Even if it was me. I would defeat myself. What that meant, I didn't know. But I was prepared to do whatever it took. I liked what I was becoming. What I didn't like was wasting time eating turkey, cranberry sauce, and mashed potatoes. Between the end of that strange winter and the approach of New Year, my life went on without change. Day would dawn and I would repeat my alternation of spending time with my friends and honing my powers in the mine dungeon. It rained a lot last month. December's uncharacteristically warm, sweaty days only added to the anxiety I was feeling about New Year's Eve. Aside from the weather, there was hardly anything to distinguish one day from the next. Each day we trained, we hung out, we read the newspapers, we read about deaths, shootings, kidnappings, bombings. I worked at concentrating my attention on the real and useful. Even with all my friends with me, every now and then I would feel a violent stab of loneliness. The very water I drank, the very air I breathed, would feel like long, sharp needles. I could hear the roots of loneliness creeping through me when the world was hushed at 4 o'clock in the morning. Christmas was coming, and then, in a few days, the world might end. Could I really be the end? I was starting to love the world so much. All of my friends, my mom, even my sister. Everyone seemed so much more special when I realized how easily they could be lost. I awoke in the middle of the night. I thought I'd heard sleigh bells far away, like the background of a Christmas song. Chimes, maybe? A church? I sat up in the bed and felt for my panda. He was still asleep. He slept more soundly than I did these days. I sat still and listened hard, but the only sound I could hear was the faint, dry thumping of my own heart. Months ago, I hated when my heart raced. It either meant I was nervous, or I had been forced to exercise against my will. That's changed. With all the time I've spent training in the mine dungeon, everything feels clear. My mind, my muscles, everything was coming into focus. I lived for the moments when I could feel my heart beat. I became excited for every pump forcing blood through my body. I felt alive. I was going to hold on to this feeling as long as I could. Where did that music come from? Maybe I'd been dreaming after all. I thought back to earlier in the summer. I used to dream all the time, but lately my dreams were fevered and confused. I missed when I dreamed of the Essentia 2000. I wondered where she was. Where did she go at night? Why didn't she ever stay with me? Where do transdimensional androids go at night? That's what we did. We exchanged gifts. But I was with Michael on this one. Something was wrong when I couldn't place my finger on it. I wondered if this was how people with dying family members felt. A sense of dread. But it wasn't a sense of dread I was feeling. It was a loss of self. A complete dissolve of everything I had ever known. The only thing that was a step beyond death. When people die, reality, the color of the sky, the sound of the trees, your memories, all remain the same. This was different. This was beyond unusual. Michael, 19, a tall, witty, brown-haired white guy. He was a few years younger than me, but I never felt like there was much of an age gap when we hung out. The summer he moved to town, we spent a lot of time together. I was back when my sister and I would spend the days outside until the sun went down, counting the accomplishments of those summer days, based on the number of mosquito bites and caught fireflies. Michael had moved to the area when he was 12. 1991. The year Michael Stipe of REM sang Losing My Religion. It was a peaceful green street at that time. Not a single thing to claim your attention. A handful of little white houses with a few fences, a stream full of crayfish, a 2-lane road they pretended was a highway. Barely a yawn of a shopping center. That was it. Most houses had maple trees planted in the yard and brand new, not yet beaten fences. And there were all those giant billboards advertising the mall they'd be building right off of 82. The house he moved into was a mid-century model style, built sometime around the late 80s. The exterior, painted in 3 shades of green, had faded handsomely in the sun and wind and rain to blend in perfectly with the surrounding countryside. There was a huge yard, and in it several stands of trees and a small pond. There was a quaint little octagonal arbor in amongst the trees that had been used as a studio. Its bay windows hung with lace curtains, faded into a nondescript color. Down by the pond, daffodils were in righteous bloom, and every morning birds came to bathe. The first owner of the house, also its designer, had been an elderly oil painter, but his lungs gave out on him and he died the winter before Michael moved in. That was in 1990, the year Billy Joel sang We Didn't Start the Fire. Michael was my best friend until I was... Didn't he move when I was 12? When did he move back to Frankton? As we drove to the city, I knew something was wrong. Looking around at my friends, I felt as if I was looking at poorly drawn pictures of them, where the artist's crude abilities had just barely captured enough of their essence to show me who they were supposed to be. I looked back. Something had been wrong for a while now. Why did I feel like this? Why was it that when I looked at Vela, I felt as if I was looking at someone else altogether? When I looked at Proto-Michael, I felt like I was looking at a beautiful image that was stained. His features were too rounded. Claudio, Chandra, how are they even talking? I looked at their mouths moving up and down and felt a strange detachment to them, as if they were speaking a foreign language without making a sound at all. I turned to the Essentia. Her face felt blurry and out of focus. I spent the duration of the 2-hour road trip ignoring the happy and excited laughter of my friends. I was playing the events of the past year over and over again in my head. I thought back to when I first arrived in Frankton. Everything felt so different. Seeing Michael again, it seemed so normal for him to live next to me. Then we met Bella, and that felt the most real out of all the things that had happened so far. I thought about Sammy. What had she been running from? Why did she leave this reality? Probably for the best. This reality has gone to literal shit. Did she perhaps sense that the end was coming? Was her reality torn apart along with mine? I thought about the mind dungeon. I had never heard of a mind dungeon before, and yet I accepted it. Just dial 333 and you'll go inside a physical version of your mind. There you can toughen up and learn to do magic. Magic? I hadn't found this strange. It was also obvious from the start. This wasn't my reality. Mind dungeons. Cats with mustaches. Beautiful women who come in and out of my life. Mysterious pan-dimensional androids. This wasn't my life. Of course something had to be wrong. I had sensed it all along. And I was so intrigued by the fun and mystery of it all. Who wouldn't be? We found parking in the city without even trying on New Year's Eve. This really was a warped reality. I followed my friends, wishing I could tell them how I was feeling, but I knew it was coming. Was this our last meal together? Would we survive the night? Would this reality continue to exist? What would happen to our souls? I wish I could jump inside their brains and make them remember, but were these even the same friends I was with the past year? It's 11:55 p.m. We're all going to die. I don't know how, but I can feel it in my bones. So it ends. I remember thinking, this is how we die. What should have been a bright future is nothing more than a bunch of kids who thought they could make a difference. A bunch of kids who fought a losing battle. I finally understood absolute loss. Video games, music, TV, expensive record players. All of these material things have value, but they can't be valued above the people in your life. Bella lost the man who hurt her. Sammy lost her mind. Rory lost his sister. What had I ever lost? It's a funny thing to grow up with everything in life. When I was 4, I vacationed to Italy one summer. I did every year for the next 2 years, and you know how much I appreciated that travel? You guessed it. I didn't appreciate it at all. I met a kid in college who had never left the state. He said his parents didn't take vacations. I didn't realize people didn't travel. I didn't realize how much I had, and how little I had done to earn it. Now that there's nothing here, I realize what a little shit I was. I thought about my soul and whatever the hell that meant. Did I even believe in souls? Well, I did to a certain extent. I think the problem is people of 100 different ideologies say different words. Soul means one thing to one person and something entirely different to another. I thought about my mom, my sister, about Vella, Rory, Michael, Chandra, and Claudio. I thought about all my friends from college, my past girlfriends, teachers, random people on buses. And they were all gone. Simply gone. Gone where? When you die, you don't enter the soul space. Soul space isn't heaven or anything stupid like that. It's the place between places. No, that's not entirely right, though, is it? It's the place between. The place between places. There was nothing left for me here. And yet, I was scared to go. But what was the alternative? If I stayed here, I'd die, I'd starve. I'd go insane from the loneliness. The only place to go was to that place between spaces. The soul space. But how? How do I do this? How do I separate my brain from my body? How can the physical and metaphysical be separated? What happens to a mind lost in the soul space? What becomes of it? There's so many questions I should have asked the Essentia 2000. You're now face to face with God. You can ask him any question, and all you can ask is, what's for dinner? This is me in a nutshell. I lacked appreciation for those around me. I should have. No, don't think like that, Alex. There's no use in beating myself up. Is there? I don't even know anymore. Don't be so hard on yourself! That's what my mother said to me whenever I made a mistake. But was this the mantra I really should have adopted? Maybe I should be hard on myself. Maybe I'm a failure. Maybe acknowledging your mistakes makes you not a little shit! As I followed the meteorite version of myself, I felt something drop from within me. I was losing a part of myself. I was a burst pipe, and I was a plumber desperately trying to hold it all together. I was a metaphor for a sad, sad man. I followed the meteorite for ages, watching it destroy one reality, and then the next, then the next. Each time, it was as if I lost all my friends again. My mom, my sister, my dad, everyone I couldn't remember. Why couldn't I recall everyone? I thought about what Vella told me about soul survivors. Was I becoming a soul survivor? I was the sole survivor of my reality. It would be a fitting fate. I tried with earnest desperation to hold on to what made me, me. A star in the distance. You're gone again. Your soul's destroyed. I don't know how many times I've witnessed the loss of a reality at the hands of myself. What could I do? I wasn't strong enough on my own to defeat so many. I was cold. I didn't have a body, and yet somehow I was cold. Desperately, I longed for it. What was her name? She was a woman made of plastic. She was essential to my survival. How had she saved me? Why didn't I do? What was her name? What was my name? I needed to keep my mind. I needed to stay me as long as possible. But for what? What was I going to figure out? What was I going to accomplish? Why am I here? I desperately tried to recall my life. I arrived home from school, that I could recall. What had I majored in? I met a mysterious and wonderful girl named Sammy. Yes, she was... Oh, and then she disappeared, and I never saw her again. I made friends with my neighbor, and together we met a girl from another reality. Yeah, I started having dreams about a beautiful android stuck in a van. Me, my neighbor, and the girl from another dimension met a kid on the internet whose sister died. We became good friends. I chased a mysterious being from another reality to a radio tower, where it asked me to find a record. I made 2 new friends when looking for the record. The record turned out to be by the girl from the other dimension. We played the record in the radio tower, and it woke up the sleeping android stuck in the van. We chased her down. She took me inside her mind and showed me that the world was going to end, and that I was going to end it. Together, my friends and I worked hard to stop it. My eternal friends. Friends who were there for me in every reality. What happened? We couldn't do anything. It's all over. Floating away. Floating away. I'm nothing. How did I get here? How had I found this planet on my own? How is the meteorite not already here? Something is happening. Somewhere in the isolated recesses of my mind, like a warm light in the distance, an idea is forming. A completely human genius and kind-intentioned idea. Something that no other version of me would do. And now my body is filled with that overwhelming feeling that I'm about to do the right thing. I always made a choice. A lazy choice. Not today. Today, I choose differently. As I approached the planet, I wondered about the nature of their reality. Could I intervene? Was there another me in this reality?
Before you answer, I want to thank you for listening to my long story. I'm afraid that this reality will soon end. And, once again, you'll be destroyed, along with Vela, Chandra, Rory, Claudio, and Michael. I have drifted aimlessly in the soul space, and it is terrifying. With each passing moment, I lost a tiny portion of myself. Each time I witnessed the various versions of myself extinguish life in another reality, I lost an even greater peace. Alone, tired, terrified. I saw everything with such terrific clarity that my own mind felt vague and boundless. Coming to you, asking for help, I think about how the Essentia 2000 must have felt first coming to me. When I'm looking at you, I get this feeling like you've made up your mind long before I even asked for your help. So what do you say? Will you help me defeat parallel versions of ourselves? Fine. I guess you're one of the bad guys. I thought you were different. I thought my story would be enough to get you off your ass and make you do something with your life. If you don't reconsider, everyone here is going to die. What do you say? I thought my story would be enough to get you off your ass and make you do something with your life. Good. I understand that in your reality, you interface with the soul space via a gaming device. Man, I wish I had one of those. That would have made my life so much easier. There are many things I have to tell you, but to tell you everything would probably take a very long time. Hours, maybe. I wish I could say how sorry I am for everything that's happened to you in your parallel lives because of my mistakes. Unfortunately, I lacked the courage to act in the past. But I plan to make up for it today. In my reality, I knew you all as Michael, Vela, Rory, Claudio, and Chandra. In many lives, you were different things to me. But names and relationships don't matter. What matters is how much you've always been there for me. I want you all to join me once again and do something absolutely crazy. I plan on confronting Proto-Me and destroying it. I don't know what will happen when I get there, but I've faced this thing before, and I think I know what I need to do to defeat it. Or me. Or us. Me and you.
Did I say something wrong? You, kinda stopped talking for a while and looked all deep in thought.
I just realized something.
Y2K is the bomb!